Ghana's presidential and parliamentary elections are not far off, and at the center of all regulations, events, and activities leading up to the big day is the Electoral Commission. Today, we look at the Electoral Commission and its mandate in simple terms. My name is Noella Seidu, and you just tuned into Law Express. Stay with us.
Richard Kwame Odu-Mensah is a private legal practitioner. In his leisure time, he enjoys playing lawn tennis. Kwesi Austin is a private legal practitioner. Outside of his legal work, he finds enjoyment in staying active on the field and expanding his knowledge through books. Noella Seidu. She's a private legal practitioner and a consistent member of our 3-lawyer panel on the show every week. She also doubles as the host of the show. She likes to play tennis and read.
So we are dealing with the Electoral Commission.
Yes.
The Electoral Commission. And it's been a journey to get the Electoral Commission as it is, as we have it in the current dispensation. We'll do a bit of, we'll go back a bit and see how it has evolved to this present situation.
So
now,
you want to take us back in time?
We'll take you back in time, yes. Now, from independence, 1960, etc., there wasn't an electoral commission as we know it now. Elections were generally organized by the Ministry of Local Government. They conducted anything that had to do with public elections, etc., And you can imagine the kind of mistrust, complaints about lack of fairness, suspicion. Yeah. Because in the modern time, if you situate it within the modern context, it's like a party has won, formed a government, and a ministry within that government is going to be responsible for conduct of elections or elections to usher in the next or determine the next government. So it was fraught with a lot of suspicion, etc., it was after 1966 that the calls for a formalized institution to conduct elections, a more neutral institution to conduct elections, heightened. So in or about 1968, a committee was set up to look into the issue of the formation of an independent institution for the conduct of elections. It was led by Srebo, a lawyer called Srebo. So they went into the matter and put together the blueprint for the establishment of an independent institution. And so for the purpose of the 1969 election, an interim electoral commission was formed to conduct that election, and that was probably the first time a formal institution dedicated to the conduct of public elections. Piloting the institution, more or less. So that is where the EC, as we know it now, can take its root from. Now, in 1968, VCRAC Crab, in fact, was the first, electoral commissioner per se. So he led that process for the conduct of the 1969 election, and that is how it went up until, for all the constitutions that came after it, made provision for an electoral commission. And so it has moved in that way until we had the 1992. Yes, evolved. It has evolved. It has evolved. Certain underlying features have remained constant. Some have changed. So, for instance,
independence?
Independence has been the non-negotiable feature that they've been looking for. But there have been a few tweaks. If you look at, for instance, the 1979 Constitution, it made provision for a sole electoral commissioner. After that, we have metamorphosed or opted for the 3-member electoral commission. Not 3-member, but the chairman and 2 deputies, as opposed to a sole. Yes. So we transitioned from military rule in the 80s to the 1992 Constitution, and that made provision for an electoral commission, and the provisions therein have been supplemented by the Electoral Commission Act.
The following year, 93.
93, the Electoral Commissions Act, which
we are using still today.
We are still on it, yes. So briefly, yes, historically, this is how it has evolved.
Very insightful, I must say. So straight up, let's talk about what the EC now is in terms of its constitution.
Yeah, so the legal architecture of the EC now, it's governed by two main things: the 1992 Constitution, and then we also have an Act of Parliament, the Electoral Commissions Act, passed in 1993, as you said, Act 451, which was also amended in 2003 by Act 655. So, but if you look at the two, you realize that the Act, copiously relates to the Constitution. Most of the functions as stated in the Constitution is copied in the Act.
It ties in, it's just like the Shraj Act.
But then the key thing, as you said, is that our Constitution grants sovereignty to the people of Ghana to decide the future and representatives. And it requires that they must have free and fair elections. And as my senior said, the EC is mandated to organize free and fair elections and make sure that the wishes of Ghanaians and the people of Ghana is reflected in the elections. And so if you look at Chapter 7 of the Constitution, it talks about our right to vote, and it creates the Electoral Commission. So, in fact, the Electoral Commission now is created by 1992 Constitution, which says that there must be Electoral Commission comprising of, one, the chairman, and two...
Or chairperson.
Well, the Constitution uses the word chairman, but
I don't know.
I'm sure now. I believe the committee which set up Constitution.
If it was a gender-specific role.
Exactly.
Now it will be chairperson.
It should be a chairperson.
But it says chairman, so for me, I'll use the word chairman, and two deputy chairperson, and four other members.
Great.
That make up the
main structure.
Yeah.
Of course, there are other strategic roles that will be played by other people who work there, but these are the core members of the Electoral Commission, or the core functionaries of the Electoral Commission.
So when we talk about the Electoral Commission, mainly we are talking about the chairman, two deputies, and
the four other members. Great.
Yes. And they sit on top of the structure itself. I believe there's the administration section of it and the operations section of it, but this is the commission that sits on it and supervises these two roles that they play. So all the departments are arranged, either an administration department or an operations department.
Okay. Yes. So let's look at the functions of the Electoral Commission. We all know that, yes, based on your presentation, you mentioned about the right to vote. It's our rights. It's also a duty, civic duty. And for this to happen, there should be a safe space, a trusted institution, which is required to see to it that this happens. Of course, no institution is perfect, but what are the core functions as anticipated by our legal space or by the legal mandates that provides for this entity?
Honestly, like you rightly said in the summary, it could actually be just one function. Look, conduct elections, make sure the will of the people is reflected, end of story.
Of God and go home.
So that could have been more or less like a summary, but it's broken down so that specific elements of the work they do will be projected as specific functions, so that in terms of assessing the EC, we would know the various things that we can assess.
Are they meeting their
The first one is to compile the register and revise it at such periods as may be necessary. So compilation of the register, which is a basic function. You will hear political parties, political commentators talking a lot about the register because it's the source document, the base document on which the election will be conducted.
It's actually the book of life.
The book of life.
If your name is not found in the
on the day of voting,
you do not share in the goodness. Yes, you will be allowed into the father's house, more or less.
and the political parties
more like
hold
the mother's
it.
House.
Mother's house.
And the political parties hold it very high.
Absolutely.
Because it's
sacred.
very, very important.
I mean, it's the source of
For
all the
good
power,
reason,
like he
for good
says.
reason, yes.
Yeah.
And so it branches out into several things, for instance, to ensure that the register is accurate. It reflects all the people who are entitled to vote and have registered. It eliminates the people who maybe found their names in there, but for whatever reason are no longer qualified to vote, including for reasons of death, etc., etc.
And even for some offenses.
Persons, so for whatever reason, it is their obligation to ensure that the register that comes out, that is going to be employed for the purpose of the election, will be accurate. It would reflect, those qualified to vote. Not only that, and sometimes we also lose sight of the fact that the register is supposed to tell us not only who should vote, but where each person is supposed to vote. So that if I registered in polling station A, I should expect that the entire register should have my name at polling station A, so that when I appear there on D-Day to cast my vote, I will be able to do so. So it's about the people, and it's about where, the polling stations that exist and who should vote where. So that all that comes into the reckoning as far as the obligation to compile the register is concerned.
And just to add to that, people have had cause to sue the Electoral Commission in court at the Supreme Court based on the compilation of register of voters, because I think Abu Ramadan had to sue the EC on the basis that, in their view, the register of voters at that time was not accurate and had included some persons who had used the NHIS card, who, in their view,
were not qualified.
Non-Ghanaians could sneak in, and also people who had, passed on and stuff. So the register of voters is very important, and so people are always making sure that it is accurate and reflects the current.
Still on the register, we made references to the fact that some people may no longer be on the list by virtue of death. We talked about other instances where you've committed an electoral offense and you've been struck out for some time. What about people who renounce citizenship? I am yet to hear that anywhere on any platform. What happens to these people when they renounce their citizenship? Because you go probably to the US, you take in a new citizenship. Yes, you do not opt to be a dual citizen.
Yes.
At that point, you had been properly registered. Could you just sneak in to vote again? Who is paying attention to that space?
Well, I've never thought about that situation.
We actually don't pay attention but there are many categories of people that probably are just slipping through loopholes. But I'm sure that the authorities will be minded of these and might have some mechanisms through maybe the foreign affairs structure to check it out.
So that is the difficulty. So for instance, when it comes to death, the rules would be that you should tender a death certificate.
Yeah.
So then, where there's no death certificate, where for financial reasons, for instance, the family has simply not, we take certain things for granted in Accra, but in the rural areas, if there's no death certificate, then, then it's a question of, like you said, people stating, affirming,
people in the
or whatever.
Neighborhood, attesting.
And it will also involve an active person, somebody actively going to the EC.
Yes. How many people care about that?
I know that this person has died, or this person was a Ghanaian, has ceased to be a Ghanaian.
But even with that, nobody announces these things.
So it's not announced. So that is why they do the voter registration exhibition exercise, so that everybody in the community, especially on polling station by polling station at that level, would see the total number of people that are registered to vote. So if you know for a fact that such and such a person is dead, such a person has ceased to be a citizen and therefore does not qualify to vote, then you raise the objections. So that as we speak, I'm not sure that there's a mechanism that is tracking these kind of things, so that once you renounce your citizenship, it pops up somewhere and it doesn't exist. So it depends a lot on the information that will be provided to the EC by citizens as part of their duty,
so
especially during
citizen vigilante in protection of the voters register.
So for us as Ghanaians, it's important for that message to go out, that people should refrain from attempting to vote for deceased persons. People who know that they have renounced their Ghanaian citizenship, etc., should not attempt to register or to vote, because it would be an offence that would carry the sanctions imposed by law.
And the Electoral Commission must put in place
measures
to ensure that this happens, because their duty is to compile and also to revise. So as part of the revision power, they have to put in measures to ensure that people who are dead or people who have renounced their citizenship, names are taken out from.
But without going too deep, it has implications. So that if you have a register that, say, for theory's sake, 30% of the people are dead but have not been taken out. Now, after voting, they would say that there was only 50% turnout, which gives a certain impression, but that is actually not...
Shows apathy.
Shows apathy. Yeah, so it's important that the EC gets it right. Okay. And then speaking also on registers, I just wanted to indicate that there are various registers. We tend to think of the main register as the register, but there are absentee list register, proxy register, there are various registers. So the attention should be across all of these registers. And when we get all of these right, then we can truly say that we have a credible register
system in place.
Yes.
Great. So, to talk about I think we've dealt a lot on the registers. So let's move on to demarcation of electoral boundaries.
Aside compiling and revising, the Electoral Commission's duty is to also demarcate electoral boundaries.
Okay.
They have to demarcate electoral boundaries. So when it comes to national elections, parliamentary elections, they have to demarcate constituency boundaries. And they are also allowed to revise it as and when it is necessary, when there is
based on the parameters that they use. If it's about population, land size, and all of that, right?
Yes. So when it comes to electoral boundaries, it is within the realm of the...
I think we shouldn't skip local government elections as well.
Exactly.
So after the parliamentary bit and other national elections, we look at local government. So the DC's assembly elections.
Unit committee.
Unit committee.
Electoral areas.
Yes.
The assembly electoral areas.
Yes.
It is demarcated
and zoning, by
the Electoral Commission. Yes.
Okay.
And that's why this whole brouhaha, SAL, etc., is a matter of concern to the Electoral Commission because it's rather unfortunate that these things happened, and unfortunately those people were not able to vote, for the parliamentaries, simply because of this issue of demarcation, etc. So it can have profound consequences. Yes. It's not simply a question of drawing lines, but it can, and we've seen it, affect the people's right to vote.
Great. It's time for us to go for a quick break. When we come back, we would move on to highlighted the role of the EC in the conduct and supervision of elections. But we need to add on referenda. So go for a quick break, and when we come back, we tackle that. This is Law Express. Stay with us.
Another role of function of the EC is to conduct and supervise public elections and referenda. Referenda does not happen too often, especially with when it comes to the Constitution. It's not something that happens often, but if it must happen, it is something that falls within the ambit of the EC to supervise and to conduct, to ensure that the areas for discussion in the referenda are the areas that the people of the country feel should be looked at, feel should be changed,
and should be part of it directly. Because we have parliamentarians who represent the views of people as zoned by the EC. But when it comes to referenda, you want every person's voice to count. It's almost like choosing a president. Anybody who is qualified and must have a voice should be heard. And should count.
The recent referenda was when new regions were being created. But it was not a nationwide referendum because it didn't affect the whole nation.
So it just affected a specific
regions. So fortunately, we didn't get the opportunity to be part of it because it didn't affect us. But I'm sure in the future, with the issues about the constitutional amendments and whatever, I'm sure the opportunities will be created for us to participate. The last nationwide referendum was 1992, the adoption of the 1992 Constitution. So we are waiting for an opportunity. I want to vote.
Why are you just in a hurry to participate
in
the referendum?
He wants
to tick a box.
To be sure that And it's innocuously crafted to conduct and supervise elections, but a lot goes into it. A lot goes into conducting and supervising. And it cuts across every single detail, from preempting how many people will come and where they are going to line up and vote in an orderly manner.
Making sure you are ready to take care of that and supervise that.
To looking at how many personnel you would need per polling station, what their roles are, they are trained to do ABC, all of that, everything in connection with an election, transportation of material, the setup, making sure that everything is right for the election.
How many voting booths should be
precisely
deployed
so planning
to every
it
place?
out, laying it out, and actually supervising
the whole project management.
Project management, yes. And on the day there will be issues will come up. People don't understand
How do you
this.
resolve
How do you
them?
resolve this? You are talking about security. You are talking
How
about
do you assist people to vote, assisted voting, and all of that?
So it's a whole, like
operation.
you said, project management that falls a lot within the ambit of the operations.
Then after the voting is the counting.
The counting.
Which is more important.
And even declaration and all.
Yes.
Like how it's done.
Declaration.
We can easily go and form a queue and vote, but then when it comes to the collation, the counting, the collation, these are major issues that political parties have an eye on.
Growing up, I used to think it was the National Commission, Civic Education, that was required to talk about voting and all of that, because they were very vocal and used to talk a lot more. And it's because of the structure. You remember those information vans that used to go around? Yes. You have an NCC official sitting in there making the announcement in the local dialects. But we tend to forget that the EC has that role. I'm not seeing much of that because probably they are too busy with the other bigger issues. But this is what culminates into all the other things. If we're not aware of the fact that you are preparing ID cards in a particular manner at a particular time, we're not aware of the manner in which you intend to supervise your public elections, we're not aware of when you intend to compile, register, and to tidy them up, clean them up, we're not aware of the new boundaries you want. How do we get involved?
And like you said, in recent times, I've seen that they've tried to put a few things on their website, and occasionally when topical matters come up, you can get something circulating on social media.
That's social media.
Purporting
Look,
to be issued
those days,
by
the
EC.
only thing I used to see was a notice of poll. You know that laminated picture nailed on the walls or on trees? That was the extent of EC's PR I saw.
I think there's so much that has to be done by way of education. That's really
for
one
different
area
categories
for different
of people.
categories of people, for people at different levels of education. The whole purpose, if you speak to people, the whole purpose for election, it will shock you that in the present time, someone can tell you that, well, for me, I don't belong to a political party, so I'm not going to vote.
I said I was shocked when I found somebody, a whole lawyer, who said to me, a whole adult in his 30s, said to me, I've never voted. I was in shock. And
says it with some pride in quotes.
Yeah. I was so shocked.
There has to be education. There has to be, education on what elections mean, and the role of elections as far as the democracy that we say we are practicing is concerned. That is basic. This is foundational. Yeah. People have to understand that, you need to have a voice. You need to send a signal, whether it's a signal to the ruling government or to the opposition government. Your vote represents what you are saying. And if we really want to progress, for instance, we talk about voter apathy, etc., etc. But when people begin to understand that, it is integral, as an integral part of our progress journey that you vote. So for instance, maybe I'm digressing a little bit, but if a government wins an election by 60% vote, and then the next election it wins by 80%. It is a signal to that government that we like what you are doing. Continue with what you are doing. Continue in that direction. So it's a signal, and we lose such opportunities. The converse is also true. If you win an election by 70%, and the next election you are at 30%, it is a signal that you have disappointed us. And it's also a signal to the government in waiting, that if you come and you
This
do not
could
meet us,
happen
this
to
same
you.
thing is going to happen to
Yeah.
you. So we need that education. We need, a lot of education so that our people understand the
Even
significance
the purpose of the election.
Precisely.
The lack of education reflects in the voting. When people vote, you realize that so many sport ballots. Because people don't even know how to
Proceed,
vote.
yeah.
Properly vote.
Somebody look at it and say, and put it here. He say he likes all the people, so put it on their faces.
Exactly.
That is how he understands it.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't even know that you have to put it in a box. You put it in
On the
between.
face.
Etc. Yes.
Or outside.
And
the lines.
every year, every time we have an election, the number of sport ballots increases.
Yeah.
Means that still we have
A long way to go.
Yeah. And the EC probably, when it comes to the lack of education, the mandate to educate,
Yeah.
probably, in my estimation, has a lot of work to do. Has a lot of work to do.
I think that is one thing that we all agree on. And he gave an example of what you would consider to be so basic, so elementary that you'd expect that everybody should know, which is where to put your thumbprint on it. This is
You
basic.
were in the queue for this thing. This was the one job you had.
In 4 years.
You had one job
in 4 years.
and you messed it up on the D-Day after
Exactly.
waiting for 4 years.
So if we are not getting this right, how are we going to understand the more technical aspects of the election? How do we understand what our obligations are when we say there's exhibition going on? How do we begin to even understand what it means? If they say voting, special voting is next week, do we know what it means? So these are even the more technical aspects of it.
How do you take advantage of proxy voting?
How do you take advantage of proxy because you will not be
You will
available?
not be
So if you don't even know where to place your
And at
time,
what
you can't.
time this proxy voter window is.
Yeah.
Because it was just open for like 3 days or so.
Yes.
And it's gone. It's time for another break. And when we come back, we talk of the proper storage of election material and tie that into the other functions as prescribed by law. This is Law Express. We'll be right back.
So proper storage of election material. Now, I would take this function to actually start with production of election material because there's no point storing 100 ballot papers with your life.
Production or procurement?
Well, production, procurement.
It's all together.
Yes.
Being procurement.
If you guard 100 ballot papers with your life, and yet another 100 is being produced elsewhere, which would come into the fray and distort your numbers.
Now. So you're talking proper procurement or production of electoral materials.
So it starts with, for instance, printing of ballot papers, printing of polling booths, etc. That has to be done within the context of security and
there's always this supervision where political parties send their reps to monitor the process.
Precisely.
All through.
It's all part of making sure that so from the time the things are produced, we are all there together with the EC. The EC shows us that this is the list, this is the number we are printing, etc., etc. Then once it has been printed, it's going to be conveyed to a safe place. The parties have to know, the parties have to be aware of it, and then immediately before the D-Day itself, it would be distributed to the various regions, the various districts. Again, it has to be done under proper supervision and in circumstances that will not damage the materials themselves. Yes. If water flooded a region's ballot papers, you can imagine what will happen, because it's not easy to print within a short period.
You would need a whole process.
Exactly.
To start printing again.
So you would understand why this is necessary for the EC to be able to come out with credible elections, because if there are duplicates of election material, nobody would. And then topical, for instance, is and I'll consider that to be election material as well. We've been talking about the BVDs, the BVRs, etc., etc.
Oh, yeah.
These are materials directly connected with the election, etc.
And these materials are instruments, and otherwise it reduces the confidence of the political parties in the game. If they can see electoral materials in the market, people are having access to it. The question is, I mean, how did you get it? And especially with these BVVs, which is missing, allegedly missing, reduces the confidence of political parties. So that the ability of the EC to be able to properly secure and store these materials also has the ability to give confidence.
Inspire confidence in the party.
Political party.
But we have talked about it as if their job ends after the elections. Post-elections, the electoral materials have to still be stored for a stipulated period of time.
Precisely.
Because there could be election challenges, there could be audits, and all of that. So storage is before, during, and after. It's a whole period.
Precisely.
And that's why they have to provide security during the elections. Otherwise, people can go and still snatch ballot boxes. It is no more common nowadays, but it was very common.
Yes.
After voting, a macho man will come and then snatch it, put it in a motor bag and run away.
So there may be other functions prescribed by law, and it's not just the act as in what we are working with today, but other regulations and other legal parameters that come by way of the mandate of the EC. Can we now move on to the independence of the Commission? We earlier on mentioned that, but it's very important because that's the main grounding of the institution. Without trust that they will be fair and neutral, nobody will want to work with the EC.
And it's important because of the historical background my senior gave.
Yes.
Where we came from, a minister of local government being in charge, and realize that no, I mean, that minister cannot look into the eyes of Kwame Nkrumah and say, you lost the election. You fire him before you make the announcement. And so, as part of the committee of inquiry and the electoral reforms, we said we want an independent, properly so-called institution. That, and I like the way the Constitution puts it. They must not be controlled,
subject to the
control
or direction
by any person or by any authority. However, except provided for by the Constitution. And so the EC, clearly independent. Sometimes when a matter even goes to court, the courts are always very careful giving directions and giving, I mean, supervision orders to the Supreme Court. And in fact, some of the cases that have gone to court, the Supreme Court has been very careful. They have been avoided giving direction. They say, well, the EC is independent, and so they should go and perform their function. But then the Constitution guarantees that the Electoral Commission is independent. In other countries, they even add the independent to their name.
The Independent Electoral Commission. I on the independent. That would be capital.
Maybe we should have also added it, but even though you have not added it, our Constitution is very, very
our whole
explicit.
country is independent, so we are presuming that everybody knows that the EC is automatically independent.
Well, maybe that's why we didn't add it.
In terms of independence, it's looked at in two aspects. There's what they call de jure independence. I'm going a bit legally. That is the independence that the law of the country prescribes. So for us in this country, you have the Constitution and the Electoral Commission Act speaking to the independence. So then we tick the box as far as formal independence is concerned.
As in institutional independence, it's a standalone. In terms of, this is an entity that is independent of government arms, and it's there for its purpose.
It's independent, so it's codified, it's written, so that is satisfied. Then there's the practical element of independence, and that looks at whether, in spite of the legislative independence provisions, the Commission is practically, in fact, independent and is able to act independently of the opposing force. And that is where sometimes concerns...
And we are looking at independence in fact and in deed. And you're also looking at people's perception of the independence of the EC. Because you should not just be doing it, but you should conduct yourself in a manner that everybody sees that you are indeed independent.
But that is the problem when it comes to perception. Because... realistically,
what's the measure, right?
That is the point. Every political party that is in opposition has some skeptic about the independence of...
Not necessarily. I mean, and even at that, there will be percentages.
Yes.
I mean, no institution is perfect.
Yes.
And it's not, I'm yet to see a time where everybody would support everything the EC does and says, look, this EC, if you were to go on a referendum, that everybody would say, yeah, they are independent. Always you have a percentage of it, or some people suspecting them.
Yes.
But the question is, what is the quantum, what is the percentage of all Ghanaians being skeptical about the conduct of the EC? That is the measure of perception.
So we will not get a hard and fast figure to say that this is the perception.
I mean, that hasn't been done.
For the EC, it is their duty to, in terms of their utterances, in terms of their communication, in terms of the justifications for the decisions that they make. When you do these things, and it's difficult for someone to question why you are doing A, B, and C. It works in your favor. It works to create the perception.
Confidence.
Yes, inspire confidence. Because if you take certain decisions to which the citizens or some parties believe does not work towards achieving your broader objective of getting everybody registered, getting everybody being able to vote, then justification for your decisions become difficult. And when you are not able to properly justify your decisions,
no matter how good your intentions were, it defeats the purpose.
Yes. So that is practical, independence, separate from what has been provided for in our legislation. And it is key. It is key because it affects also the legitimacy of the results that you are going to declare. You want to be truly independent so that you say that really this is the outcome of the elections, and people will be more disposed to accepting
more believable election results.
Yes.
I mean, related to independence, of course, free, fair, and honest elections. And so when people create the impression is that the elections are not free, they are not fair, I mean, then people would also doubt the independence of the Electoral Commission, because that is their mandate.
Yes.
And so
free and fair and independence in terms both of its operations and its personnel. Let the people there not be people
the EC is an institution. It needs people to function.
Yes.
So if the person you put in, from probably the manner in which the appointment was made and the person's day-to-day conduct, it diminishes people's confidence in the institution. It affects the acceptance of the final outcome.
But the persons who are appointed to the Electoral Commission and the workers are also very important.
Yeah.
In the sense that those persons must not be aligned to any political views.
So once again, independence
must not be aligned and must not be perceived to be aligned.
Yeah, that's the point. So that if we believe that this person, some political views think that this person belongs to the other side, clearly the independence
is gone.
It's
gone. Eroded.
Yes. And there are issues where you hear on news that, I mean, perception, and a person who belongs to a political party has been appointed as a presiding officer.
It takes us back like 10 or more years again.
Destroys the independence.
Yeah. So even what the person is doing, which is fair, like you said, with good intent, etc. Just the mere fact
there'll always be
that
doubts
he has
around your conduct. Even when you're supporting the other side, they'll be paranoid. Like, what is he preparing and factoring us for?
Is there an ulterior plan? So many things.
Some by-elections where a certain MP was seen giving money to an electoral officer clearly takes away the independence and the free and fair elections.
Well, the perception, but the question is, what were the intentions? And at that point, all those things wouldn't matter. If the person was genuinely in need and there was nothing attached to it, once you look like you're about to compromise a neutral and independent person, and that's it. We have some questions coming in by way of social media. Let's attempt to answer them.
What does the EC do to ensure that it's not influenced by any political party to favor the said party in an election?
Yeah, so for an electoral commissioner, right, in terms of what you should do, you are supposed to take any step or do anything that will not compromise your impartiality, that will not constitute a fetter on your independence. The law cannot legislate for every single thing that you are not supposed, situation that will come. But like he said, you shouldn't go collecting money from a stakeholder, a person, a political party, because that would either impair or appear to impair your independence. So you are bound by that code of ethics. You are bound by the obligation to be impartial and independent.
And do your work as is required of you.
Be professional
in
about
a transparent and honest manner.
In an honest manner.
Such that you, if you need to engage stakeholders, you do not just engage them to take a box, but engage them because you want to come to a consensus, a compromise, get them to come along, listen to the views of all stakeholders evenly or equally, such that you are not giving priority to one side as against another, especially where, you know, naturally a president has to appoint an EC. So a government will definitely appoint. But once you take on the role as this statesperson, who is supposed to now be playing God in the future of a country, you need to be above, you know, but a lot of things.
The government appointing must make sure that it protects their independence. And that is why my argument is the government should not appoint somebody who is linked to a certain political party. Otherwise, it throws away
But at the end of the day, when you are empowered and you are a human being, you can decide that probably you are not even connected to any party for any reason. But some people, you know, we are humans. Some people are so grateful to the point that they forget that you are coming within a particular role and you have a scope and a mandate. So the person comes in, you were hitherto neutral to a large extent. But once you've got your job, you feel like I now owe my job to this particular political group. And for that matter, anything of theirs, I must make sure I push.
That is true.
So that becomes a personal decision.
The guiding principle
to be correct
must always be the legislation and the oath that you took to assume your office. This is what should guide you at all times. If you want to show gratitude, the gratitude should be to the people of Ghana by delivering them fair, proper elections. It's not about gratitude to an appointor or any other group of people. So that should guide your conduct.
And with regards to the oath, it becomes a personal vow.
It's a vow.
That you have to make sure that you live to the standards.
Exactly.
Precisely.
But then the appointing authority must try to protect the institution. That's the point I'm making, that they should make sure that in appointing...
That this is someone who has taken this oath, and therefore...
But in addition to that, the EC officials must also be careful in their utterances if they want to portray independence. Some of the things you may say or do can take away the independence.
We know everybody comes from a family. You know you might have a wing of your family on one side or the other. But at the end of the day, you are in a position of trust. And you're required to go by the standards as stipulated by the law, your conscience, and of course, the general good. So, yeah, we can say that angels should come around the EC. But once you get there, you should know that you are playing God at that point.
That should be the ideal situation, but sometimes it doesn't also usually work practically. And so, like the EC who took money from that political officer, I mean, probably may not have seen anything negative with it, but to take money from somebody who's a political actor, very, very, very wrong. It compromises your independence. And another point you made is the EC officials must give fair hearing to all political parties when it comes to the decision making. Very, very important. That is why the IPAC platform is very, very important. When one political party thinks that he's not being heard, or even if he's heard, he can hear, but he can refuse to also...
Not be afforded all the opportunities that someone else is being afforded.
It compromises the independence of the EC.
I understand that the Electoral Commission is responsible for educating citizens on elections. I observe that the NCCE also performs the same thing. Is it not a duplication of functions?
Yeah, so the NCCE broadly under the Constitution is to engage in civil education.
Yes.
Broadly. That includes elections and election-related matters. But when it comes to elections, specifically, the Constitution says that should also be done by the Electoral Commission. So somehow there is an overlap. There's a link. But as I said, NC broadly civil education, but then when it comes to elections, that may be the link, but then the Electoral Commission
I see it more as a complementary thing, where the NCC does for everything, health, I mean, over the years. They will talk about anything. They would also talk about even green earth. It's a commission for civic education. So anything that concerns us all, they are there. When there's a pandemic, they're supposed to go around and announce vaccinations. Yeah. They've been doing this historically. But when it comes to the mandate of the Electoral Commission, that education is limited to their job and their function. So they won't go beyond the parameters. And if it's election season and the NCC needs, the Electoral Commission needs the NCC to complement by going to the communities to announce dates and give information generally, the advance will be able to do that. So I don't see, information cannot be too much, can it?
Yes, it's about general and specific. Like you said, NCC it's broad. But you'd see that in the exercise of their functions, there may be certain things, certain topics, certain issues that the EC as the specialist institution will be best positioned to provide
further and better
information, further and better particulars, guidance on those issues. So it's important that that function is, so both of them can.
We even need more education.
Yes, we are lacking in education anyway. So both of them will have that function, except that the information NCCE would give out on elections must be that which the Electoral Commission approves of and sanctions. That should be the
when it comes to elections, election period, we see the two bodies working together.
Yeah.
In fact, most of the district, they two work together. The EC officials would use the facilities and
especially.
Although
now we're doing more of social media, radio, TV, and other.
So it shouldn't be a problem.
But let's now dovetail into the offences under the Act. The regulations will give you more.
Definitely.
But today we're just looking at the Electoral Commission Act, and there's just one bit of it, right?
Yes. So it doesn't specify offenses generally.
Yes.
But it is to the effect that anybody that does anything to willfully obstruct the Electoral Commission
or interferes
with the Electoral Commission in the exercise of its function has committed an offense. Okay. So anything at all, whether it's specified, whether it's not specified, to the extent that it is interfering or obstructing the work of the Electoral Commission in the discharge of their functions, it will be held to be an offense. So you see that many more offenses will be coming up. For instance, if you for example, the IT-related offenses are newer categories of offenses that did not exist in '93 when this was being done, and that's why it's necessary to phrase it so broadly, so that if you, in quote, misbehavior, you are found hauled before the court, to the extent that the court determines that what you have done is interference.
Obstruction or interfering, that's also broad on its own.
Very, in fact, when I looked at it, it's very, very broad. And
so even heckling, standing in a corner and playing loud music, if the electoral officers feel that it's interfering with what they are doing by virtue of how they are communicating to voters, you're already caught by this law.
And this law is very, very, very broad, so that we must be careful how we relate to.
So before you go, I'll ask yourself. Yes. What I'm doing going to interfere or obstruct with the performance of the duties of the commission?
Yes.
If yes, just go back home and behave well.
That's right. And like you said, some specifics are provided in some of the CIs. So for those ones, they are clear, they are provided for. But this is a safety net for the EC as far as they are
to decide.
Well, maybe not to decide, but just
make it happen as it goes.
That protection that they will not be obstructed as far as
and to the extent that it's even a criminal offense, that you could be jailed for this, for this very broad law.
Yes, you
That's
can
scary.
be jailed.
Well, I'm sure somehow in the future somebody may have to challenge this aspect of the law as so broad that anything
unless it is to be looked at in conjunction with the regulations.
Somebody creating this law, applying this law, can use it to do other things apart from the objectives of the law, in the sense that it's so broad that anything can be interference. So many things can be obstruction.
Well, anything can be alleged to be interference. So we have to trust the courts to interpret this properly, so that, and mind you, it's still subject, being an offense, subject to the regular thresholds for criminal offences, willfulness, etc., etc. They will all come into play in terms of determining whether it's an offence or not. So we will have to trust the court on case-by-case basis. When these things come before the court, then the court will ascertain whether this is really something that substantially or interferes in so as to be held to be an offence.
Okay, at the beginning of our conversation, because we are getting to the tail end now,
Yes.
We discussed the membership or constitution of the Electoral Commission, right?
Yes.
And we talked subsequently about the fact that they are appointed by the president,
Yes.
okay, acting on the advice of the Council of State.
Yes.
Now I'm adding that. We should also talk about the qualification of a person to be able to be a member of the Electoral Commission. You must have similar qualification as a person seeking to be elected as a member of Parliament.
Yes. Yes.
Do you want us to quickly brush through conditions of service of members of the Electoral Commission? Then we wrap it up.
Oh, it's a very short. I think the chairman
Yes.
would have terms and conditions the equivalent of that of a Court of Appeal judge.
Yes.
And then the two deputies would have terms of conditions similar to that of a High Court judge.
Yes.
Yes. And then the rest will be determined by Parliament.
The other four members, the difference is that the chairman and the two deputies are not allowed to hold other public offices.
And where there's a death, the rest continue. That is with the members.
Yes.
Yes.
The rest continue to work until the person replaces the person.
So
with
the other
consultation
four,
with the Council of State.
The other four may hold other public offices. And so the Constitution says that the Parliament may make a law provide them certain allowances.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the current Constitution, some of them are workers or holding certain positions within
Already within the
within
EC.
the EC,
Yes.
and they are part of the other four.
Added as members.
So already maybe it's receiving salaries. As
So you
workers.
just get an allowance for this extra role.
But in Ghana,
Because
the
not a
allowances
full-time job, right?
Ghana allowances are more
No,
important
they
than
meet-
even
they
the
meet-
salary.
Well, it depends on the quantum of allowance. And of course, the meetings. They are required to meet at least once in every 2 months.
2 months, yes.
Or at the times,
At
and
times,
places to be
yes.
determined by the chairperson. I like to be more inclusive, okay? Who shall preside over these meetings? I think we've had a great conversation. There's no way we could exhaust everything. But
Not in great detail,
we
yes.
definitely have touched on the very core aspects of this, the EC Act, and looked at what the Electoral Commission should do, how they get to be a commission. And of course, we appreciate the historical antecedents that you brought back to the panel. It's been a very interesting conversation today. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me as my co-panelists on our topic on the Electoral Commission. Viewers, today I was joined by Richard Kwame Odum and Kwesi Austin. Thank you, gentlemen. My name is Noella Seydou. Until next time, this has been our show.